Yeah, I work as a curator at the SMK, which means that I am in charge of part of the collection, which is the Royal Cash Collection, and also I do research. I have a special obligation to do research in national identity, how it is created, how it is how it is shown through art. And we know that national identity and art is very closely connected, especially when it comes to the art that is my area of special area that I know about is Danish art from the 19th century, where the nation state was created. So the art that came out of that process is the art that we connect with our national identity. And I try to connect that historical period with how we think about national identity today. It's also the period where democracy was developed as the new way to have a government that was in touch with what was going on in the public. And also it was the period of time when there was a lot of fighting, a lot of bloodshed about the development of new societies where the king would fall and political parties would take over control of society. And in that process, museums developed. And so it's all those things that come together in my research. So on top of that, I became interested in new museology and the thoughts about making museums more democratic. How could that be done? Is the answer to that could be that you would involve the users more and on different terms than normal museums do. So we have perhaps a changing idea of democracy, and we will have museums changing, and in that process they will use digital media because they are, to a large extent, they have a huge community, huge audience, and they are in some ways very democratic. In some ways they're very chaotic, but they're also a tool you can use for user involvement. It could be a kind of meeting place where people who do not come to the museum might be on the web, and we will meet there, the museum and those on the web, and have a kind of exchange there. Perhaps we can create new audiences, perhaps we can create new understanding of museums, and perhaps we will have millions of new ideas and new thoughts coming from the audience into the museums. So it's a platform for exchange. But in order to facilitate that, we have to actually change our way of doing things. It is mandatory that we do things different because museums are not, as they normally work, are not really shaped to allow great audience to have a view on what's going on. No, we don't do that. It's me, the curator, the expert, that do the exhibitions, right? I decide. I have a community of experts that I can rely on. I read books and all that, but it's an expert world. It's ruled by experts, and we can count them. We can say it's like 5,000, 6,000 experts in the world decide what is up and what is down in contemporary art, for instance. And so also it was the same thing 100 years ago. It was a small group of specialists. They choose the artworks that were considered the good artworks that could build the citizen and the society. It should be like artworks that would fit into their idea of the good example, right? But now we need something else. Or the possibility is that if we are truly democratic, we will allow for things that we would not think of ourselves. Things that we do not find interesting might be interesting to people in general. We do not have the answers anymore. but we still have the artworks, we still have the institutions, we still have some money, we still have the obligation to be the National Gallery of this country has an obligation to be representing the art of this country. That is what we do. So we still have these obligations, but perhaps we can negotiate it in another way. And that's what we're trying to do. What I'm trying to do is to turn a museum that is not really interested in hearing, listening to what others say, to start listening and hearing, and also start changing the actual display and the way we do our things. The processes are changing, and I also want the museum to look otherwise, because it has to be a real change, and it has to be a direct change. Like, if you have an idea, it has to be mirrored in the real world. So it's not just digital, it's not just virtual. It's like it has to have a real impact on the actual display and on the educational material that comes out. It has to be deeply influenced by all those things that comes from the outside. So I will not be a god of this collection or this museum. I will be a mediator who will filter some of these impressions and make it turn out into something that is worth looking at. So what I did is I had an idea for a participatory project that was pretty radical, I would say, because I have an old collection. Nobody cares about it. It's very hard to get at because it's plaster casts, it's copies. Nobody wants copies, right? That's the idea. The collection is actually closed because nobody cares about it. And it's about antiquity and philosophy and things that are hard to get at for people living in the modern world. It's not that accessible. So there are lots of problems here. And this old kind of museum, I want to turn into a new kind of museum. And the way to do that, I thought, was allowing people to change the display, allowing people to have their opinion on what they like and what they dislike, to give the audience an opportunity to tell their stories, and just open up the doors and listen to what they say. So I invited people to come in here, and the radical thing was not only that I listened to them, but also that they had the opportunity to actually choose the casts that they liked the most, and then we would put them on loan to those people. Museums often put their artworks on loan to other museums, but that's like between specialists. We can make an agreement that they will go to another specialist, another museum, and it will be displayed in a context that we know very well. We won't be surprised by it, really. No, it's like an exchange between a small group. But this time I open up saying, okay, you can choose what you like on your premises, and we will put it on display where you work, where you live, and where you want to use these artworks for projects that are interesting to you. So I invited 2 high school classes and dancers from a contemporary dance company to come here and choose the casts that made sense for them, right? It was not just personal opinion, but it was like what would be good for them to have to work with in high school, in art classes where they were going to use these artworks as part of their exams. Like the finishing exams would be related to these artworks. So it was serious for them, right? It was their final exams, their artworks, and what they did with it. So it was important for them. And it was the same thing for the dancers. They were allowed to choose the casts that they could use to qualify as solo dancers together with that statue or these statues. They would make a dance that would decide for them if they were good enough as soloists, as solo dancers. So it was serious for them too. And they had their choice, and then we did the normal thing that museums do. We we took care of transportation, security, and everything, and put them on display in these high schools and at the place where the dances were. And then the beautiful thing started to happen. The truly beautiful thing was that it opened up a huge space for dialogue that I would never ever have experienced before. Because I listened to the reasons why they chose these casts, which could be completely arbitrary reasons that had nothing to do with philosophy or art history, but it was their reasons, and they were good reasons for them, right? I listened to them, and what happened was then they started asking me questions about what is the real story, what is the story behind these casts. And also they felt emotionally connected to these objects that they chose. And then they started working with them. And they made wonderful projects out of it. The dancers made a top professional performance at the National Gallery that attracted so many people that they had to do another show later that day, right? Because hundreds came there.